Hi, ladies. Welcome to week 4 of Living Well at Citadel. And we're going to be talking today about addiction again. It was wonderful last night to have such a full class. And I'm really enjoying getting to know you ladies. And I feel like we're learning a lot together. I feel like it's been wonderful to have Wesley sitting in on the classes, and what a wealth of information that he has for us. So that's been really helpful. I'm changing up the schedule a little bit. Like I said last night, I'm going to have, instead of next week jumping into I think I had like restaurant information and different things. We're going to do a second week on addiction. This week, it's a lot of information, as you know from last night. And we're kind of laying the groundwork for what addiction is and what it looks like for us facing it with carbohydrate addiction. And then next week, I'm going to be giving you a lot of tools so that you can start to implement some ways to overcome. If you feel like you're dealing with addiction at any level with carbohydrate addiction, which I feel like most of us are. So this is not something to be ashamed of or embarrassed about. This is real. Our world today just absolutely throws this at us. And I think it's amazing to think of. I think it's more unusual for people not to have carb addiction. So I'm going to share my screen now. All right. Move things around and we will hop right into this. So again, week 4, sugar and carb addiction. And let's take a quick look again at what we're doing with our blood sugar when we continue eating high carbohydrate and processed foods. All right, so this is showing our blood sugar roller coaster. And what happens, as you can see, is we start the day off with a carbohydrate-rich breakfast, oatmeal, toast, all the pastries, muffins, those kind of things. And that sets the tone for the day right out of the gate with a big blood sugar spike. And then comes the drop and the hunger and that low feeling when our blood sugar drops because of that spike. It brings it down. And you grab a high carb snack at that point. That's when you start feeling a little hangry a couple hours later, and you grab that donut in the office or muffin or granola bar that is, of course, so healthy, right? Or a keto bar. Yeah, watch out for those. Read your labels. You can see how that cycle continues basically throughout the day then, and that is why our first meal, if we have one, is so important because it sets the tone for the day. And having a balanced blood sugar level all day means that you're controlling energy levels, you're balancing your moods. Whoops. You have less cravings. You don't have the crashes. You don't have the headaches. You're not continuously chasing hunger. If you start the day off with a good protein, fat, eggs, bacon kind of breakfast, okay? Keeping that blood sugar more stable and in that green zone with proteins and fats will help you feel satiated and feel much better and keep you from developing metabolic syndrome. So starting your day well will also help you with carbohydrate addiction. You won't feel that need to jump back in and grab another high glucose snack. Your body won't be screaming at you. So let's talk about carb addiction. When the purpose of eating shifts from nutrient supply to endorphin relief, it leads to excessive carbohydrate consumption and ultimately harm. Carb addiction is about temporary emotional happiness. And unfortunately, carbohydrates do not satisfy hunger, they stimulate it. Foods today are considered designer foods. They were designed to keep us addicted because when we're addicted, we buy more foods, we stop at drive-thrus more often, and their business grows because it keeps us coming back to that. And that's the nature of addiction. The term bliss point was actually coined by US market researcher Howard Moskowitz known for his work in creating soft drinks and pasta sauces, and refers to that point at which sugar, fat, and salt are blended to a delicious perfection known as a bliss point. Now, it's not too little sugar, not too much salt or fat, little too salt or fat. It's that perfect combination that makes us want to keep eating, can't stop at just one, and keep going. He also coined the phrase mouthfeel, which is a term used to describe the smoothness of ice cream or the perfect crunch of a chip that will keep a person eating more and more. And something I didn't talk about last night was back in the 70s, the cigarette companies bought a lot of the food corporations, which and then in turn, they use that information and that strategy and marketing to get people hooked on cigarettes. They kind of just push that into the food industry. So they know what they're doing. The food industry wants to sell us as much as possible. So they're going to make it taste as good as they possibly can. And they're going to make it not too sweet because they don't want us to stop. They want us to keep going. And like we've talked about in the past, our brain doesn't register carbohydrates because it's technically not food. And so it's not telling us to shut down and stop eating. It's going to we're just going to keep eating and eating and eating. That's why you can just down all those chips at a Mexican restaurant. That is so easy to do. And before you even start to feel full, your body is very full. So we consumers play a role, and we've got to educate ourselves and be actively aware of the ingredients that go into the foods we eat and what we're actually eating. So let's look at a couple of options if you struggle to control the amount of carbs you eat. You've got here an abstainer or a moderator. And we need to understand what works best for us. And I'm going to start out by saying there will be some of this where certain foods you will abstain and certain foods you will moderate. And that will change as you evolve on this journey. So in the beginning, like I was super strict when I went on a ketogenic diet because I knew I had to reverse autoimmune disease and I had many issues going on in my body. And of course, I wanted to lose weight. So I was very, very strict in the beginning. Like if we went to a restaurant and they had salmon, which was pecan honey crusted, I would be like, I need it, sir. I need it made without that crust on it. You know, I didn't even want that much on there. Because I knew not only would that not help my blood sugar, but it also would switch me to a craving cycle, and having a little bit would make me start craving more and more. Well, a few years down the road now, it's different. And we just went out last Saturday night and I had salmon with, it had like a cranberry sauce on it. And I didn't say no to it. I had it and it didn't send me off careening into cravings and all that because my body is better adjusted and I can have a little bit of that now without jumping into that craving cycle. And if I do start craving, I know I have tools and I know how to handle that much, much better than I used to. So this is a journey that will evolve. Let's jump through these though, real quick. Let's run through them. Abstainers feel the need for abstinence and because it brings them freedom. Okay. Removing all the carbs or specific foods brings freedom to someone who needs to abstain. They're no longer tormented with the decision making about food. They've decided no to sugar, no to soda, or no to chips, or whatever it is. And so they don't have to make that constant decision of, I'm just going to try to do better today, you know, in the morning when they say that. That's not an abstainer. An abstainer says, I'm not having that today. I'm choosing no on that today. So when the opportunity comes up, they don't have to look at that donut and go, oh, am I going to have that today? I said I was going to be good, but I wasn't specific. This is about being specific and being that person who abstains and says, that donut's not an option. That's not in my plan today at all. Okay. And just a side note, I do this at home sometimes if my daughter's home and we have food in the house that isn't what I want to eat, I will tell myself that's not my food. That's not for me. Like, obviously I could easily have it. It's in my house, But I tell myself that's not an option. And I make that decision and I make that commitment that that's not my food. I'm not even going to have a bite. So an abstainer finds it easier to give something up entirely rather than moderate it. They don't want to make that constant decision like we just talked about. No more, should I eat this or that? Their mind gets a break from all the food thoughts because they know what they're not doing. Studies show that 100% abstinence is actually easier than 99%. Again, it's like when you start your day saying, I'm going to do better today, without making any distinct or concrete plans. If that is me, I'm going to fail that day. I am going to eat a lot of things that are not on my plan, are not part of my goal, because I've not made that decision 100%. That doesn't mean you have to be 100% sugar-free to do this. That could mean if there's donuts today at the office, I'm not having one. I'm making that choice right now before I go into the office. If there's candy, if there's donuts, I'm not doing it today. I'm not saying I'm never doing it. I'm not doing it today. So people who abstain also benefit from not sabotaging at the end of the day because their brain is so exhausted from having to moderate and think about all day. Am I going to have this? Am I going to have that? They're not that tired. They're basically like, this is my decision. This is what I'm doing. I'm not even eating at night as far as binging at night. And so their mind is more at rest because they're not making those decisions all day long. Now, the moderator, on the other hand, feels that moderation is key. Complete abstinence to them makes them miserable. And this is for people who have anxiety about the thought of never having something again. Although, like I said, I think you can be an abstainer and not have that never have it again thought. You can say, today, I'm not having such and such. And then tomorrow, you can do it again. But today, I don't have to think about tomorrow. I just have to think about today. Moderators feel trapped by abstaining, though. Moderators are good at portion control. Something I'm not. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Moderators need options and variety. Moderators tend to stay resolved and focused all day and into the evening. God bless you. That's not generally me. I'm like, I have to make decisions ahead of time and then stick to them. But what are you? You have to decide that. Only you can say where you sit on these things with certain foods. This is your unique journey and it will evolve over time. It will change. So where is it today for you? That's what you need to look at. So let's look at some more thoughts around addiction. We talked about water versus alcohol. Water is necessary for human survival. It is triggered by thirst. It is hard to overdrink water. Water is essential. Water stimulates the satiety center of our brain. It doesn't stimulate the reward center, okay? Whereas alcohol, on the other side, is not necessary for human survival. It is triggered by an emotional need, could be a social need. We've talked about that, how important it is to be social. And if having a drink when you're out socially, that is a choice. It's not a need, but it's a choice. With alcohol, there are powerful incentives to excess and to drinking too much. With alcohol, that excess causes harm. So it rewards and stimulates the reward center of our brain. Okay. Alcohol does that. Water does not. And these comments I'm going to read to you are from Dr. Robert Sivas. And he says, we don't drink alcohol to manage our thirst. We drink alcohol to help manage our emotional needs. We all have emotional needs with stress, depression, anger, anxiety, fear, sadness, boredom, pleasure. And from time to time, at the end of a rough day, a glass of wine or beer or cocktail is a very effective way to dissipate that emotional distress. However, when you start to use alcohol more and more, not just to dissipate those that stress of the day feeling, but now you start using it to numb yourself, to soothe yourself regularly, and to get rid of the feelings altogether. Well, over time, that excessive relationship is going to cause you harm. And if you ignore that harm and continue that relationship, you've lost control of the relationship and you're basically an alcoholic at this point. Okay. So the problem for an alcoholic is not the alcohol per se. The problem is the relationship they have with alcohol, where they use and abuse the alcohol. And over time, it becomes a dysfunctional emotional management system. Alcohol puts out those emotional fires and represses issues instead of actually dealing with issues. It's a dysfunctional emotional management system without an effective way to connect with the issues in our life. So that is alcohol and water. Now let's look at food and carbohydrates. Food is necessary for survival. It's filled with protein, fat, vitamins, minerals, electrolytes, fiber, nutrients. It's hard to overeat real food. I mean, when's the last time you ate so much steak you couldn't get up and walk out of the restaurant? Whereas I can think of a lot of carbohydrates I do that with. Because it's food. Eating food is triggered by hunger. It keeps our blood sugar balanced and it leads to a healthy body. Food stimulates the satiety center of our brain. If you're eating steak and vegetables, your brain is going to come to a point where it says, we're full. We're going to put down the fork and we're done. Carbohydrates, on the other hand, they are not necessary for survival because they're not food. I mean, we eat it, but it technically is not food. It's not giving us protein, fat, vitamins, minerals, electrolytes, fiber, nutrients. It's giving us glucose, but it's not necessary for survival. Okay. It is triggered by an emotional need. And it can just be, it could be, I'm stressed, I need, feels good. I know it's going to taste good and feel good to eat that pizza and that donut right now. It's triggered by an emotional need. And there's a powerful incentive to have excess. Excess carbohydrates cause harm in our physical bodies and our mental health. There is absolutely proven now. Carbs reward our endorphin center. They stimulate the reward center of our brain. And that wants to be stimulated over and over and over. This leads to blood sugar spikes and then crashes. And eventually, when led to excess, it leads to sickness. So we have to separate our vital nutrition from our endorphin creating substances. Carbohydrates are not food. They are a drug, just like alcohol. All sugars and starches are consumed for pleasure and the endorphin high. So that's where I say it's a drug like alcohol. It's giving us a kick. It's giving us a high. We get a pleasurable feeling from carbohydrates. That in and of itself is not a bad thing. Like we talked about with alcohol, having a glass at night, doing that. Nothing wrong with that if your body can tolerate that. Some people cannot. But if it can, that's okay. But when we go to excess, when carbohydrates, we crave them so bad that we're chasing that feeling that we get from them, that's when it becomes a problem. But again, carbohydrates in and of themselves are not the problem. It's our relationship to them that is the problem. Hunger is different for people who use food which I'm going to call it food, who use that for an endorphin high or for comfort. If you're eating carbohydrates, if that's your food that you're eating and you're hungry for that because you want that endorphin high or that comfort, that's where it becomes a problem. Again, it's the relationship with carbohydrates. That's the problem. There are carbohydrates in broccoli. But I don't know anybody who's like, give me all the broccoli I can eat, you know? We don't crave that. Nobody's getting broccoli for a gift today on Valentine's Day. So we have to ask, are we hungry for in our body, or are we hungry in our brain? Are we seeking something for our brain? Typically, an obese person consumes 80% of their intake as carbohydrates, while eating around 15 eating events a day. They're eating about 15 times a day. Humans were not designed for that. We were designed to need food once or twice a day, truly. The snacks are almost always an emotional management decision, not a nutritional decision. Okay. So I know that even that statement right there we talked about it last night, how, we have been taught you need to eat every 2 hours, you need to keep that fire of metabolism burning. Well, it turns out more and more research is coming out that's just not true. We want to give our body a break. We want to let our body digest and let all that good stuff happen inside of us when we're not eating. Let it rest. Let it do its job to clean out and do autophagy and clean out the dead cells and do all that stuff. Whereas if we're constantly feeding ourselves, even if it's low carb foods, we're not giving our stomach a rest. We're not giving our digestive system a rest. So a healthy person can have all kinds of things, including carbs, that they lean into for occasional endorphin releases. That's okay. A glass of wine, you're at a party and you're at the point where you can have a piece of cake and then be done. It's not going to send you careening into a craving cycle. Then do that. You want to enjoy your time with friends. You're out shopping, exercise, all these different things that can become addictive in and of themselves are not bad things. It's our relationship to them. If you're addicted to carbohydrates and you're obese or you're type 2 diabetic, you will primarily choose food and drink for its pleasure value rather than its nutritional value. And this is an unhealthy relationship and it leads to harm. So when it leads to harm and we continue it is when it becomes an addiction, because it means that our emotional management system for how we manage our emotions, our thoughts, our desire, all that stuff is out of whack. We're going to get into a lot of tools next week on how to revamp that system and how to change our emotional management system. Okay. Ladies, our bodies were created by God in such a way that when we eat food, we get full. All right. Food comes in, blood sugar levels start going up a little bit. Our pancreas secretes insulin to bring them back down and put that where it needs to go. We get full and we stop eating. This is balance. That's why I picked that lady. I thought she looks so balanced and so peaceful. This is balance. This is homeostasis. None of that roller coaster that we saw earlier, okay? But notice I said the food goes in. Food is essential. Carbohydrates are not, okay? So when we eat sugars and starches, which are not essential, there's no feedback control loop making us feel full because it's not food, and it doesn't bring us into homeostasis. So because our body's not hearing we're full, let's stop eating now. And because we are not becoming satiated, we eat carbs to excess. If what we're eating is carbohydrates, we're going to eat it to excess. You could never become obese by eating essential foods. Your body would stop you. That's how God created us. You would feel full and everything would work the way He created it to work. But unfortunately, that's not where most of us are. Many, if not most Americans, deal with carbohydrate addiction and don't know it. Otherwise known as an unhealthy emotional management system. An alcoholic says, I need a drink. A carboholic says, I'm hungry. Alcoholism is as much a hydration problem as carbohydrate addiction is a nutritious problem. In other words, we don't drink alcohol for hydration, and we don't eat carbs for nutrition. We may eat carbs for energy and the way it makes us feel, but again, it's not a sustaining form of nutrition. And if we drink too much alcohol or eat too many carbs, it's going to lead to harm. So let's look at this definition here by Dr. Rob Sivas. Chronic excessive use of an instant gratifying endorphin activating substance or behavior to the point of harm while ignoring and distorting the reality of the harm to validate and justify the tension relieving high and continue the relationship with carbohydrates. That's what carbohydrate addiction is. Addiction occurs when harm is ignored and the behavior is continued. Addiction is defined by the loss of control over a relationship with whatever it is. Okay? It can be food, it can be alcohol, it can be drugs, it can be shopping, it can be sex, it can be all kinds of things. Addiction is defined by our loss of control over that relationship. Addicts develop an incredibly sophisticated mechanism of minimizing, of justifying, trivializing, of rationalizing, and denying the problem to protect themselves from recognizing the harm and allowing themselves to continue the behavior despite harmful circumstances and consequences. All right. I know that's a lot. Feel free to rewind it and write it down. It's powerful when you take time to sit in this and really think about what I'm saying. This is powerful. This is the kind of information and knowledge we need to overcome this. Let's look at the addiction cycle. We start with an emotional trigger at the top right of this cycle. The addiction cycle starts with a triggering event that in turn triggers emotions or feelings often associated with discomfort, pain, stress, anger, trauma, boredom, loneliness. We all have different triggers here, okay? They don't have to be as deep as trauma. They can just be boredom. The beautiful sunshine is just shining in. My face might disappear, but it feels good to have the sunshine. We all have different triggers. The emotional trigger ignites a desire to squelch that feeling. So we get that trigger and we're like, oh, I don't like that. I need to stop that. We often feel a need to shut down those negative emotions. The way for a person who's addicted to something to subdue that emotion or feeling is to act out with their, I'm going to say, drug of choice. Like I said, it could be all kinds of things, whatever the vice is. And that triggering event then is going to lead to them start craving. They're going to start craving whatever that thing is that they feel is going to give them some comfort because they don't like that emotional trigger. They don't like what it just did to them. We don't like that. I'm going to speak in first person. So then we start craving something to stop it. Okay. Cravings can be described as an overwhelming feeling or desire to soothe the pain and diminish that feeling that triggering event ignited. Again, this can just be boredom. It doesn't have to be a huge trauma. Stress hormones directly affect the reward chemical dopamine, okay? In this time of stress, the chemical responses in the body are affecting an addicted person's behavior. That person will seek out their drug of choice, which they believe will alleviate the cravings now. And as the craving sensations increase, the addicts will eventually return to what's called ritual behaviors. Ritual behaviors can be described as activities, thoughts, or ideas that addicts engage in as part of their addiction. Okay. Once ritual behavior has started, it is very hard for most addicts to turn away. In a sense, ritual behavior can be seen as the preparation or leading up time to using or eating or acting out whatever it is that we're craving. For example, an alcoholic may store up on alcohol several days before binging. A carb addict may do the same thing. Start storing up, planning ahead. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to make sure when I drive past this place because I'm going to stop and grab you know what. Whatever it is, that treat. The longer that an addict is engaged in ritual behavior and that thinking about it and that planning and looking forward to it, the harder it may be for them to stop the cycle. And one thing I didn't mention last night is that I feel between craving and ritual is a key moment in the beginning of this journey for you to break free of your addiction. And I'm going to really talk about that next week. I'm kind of putting together a whole curriculum on what to do in that cycle time between craving and ritual. Now, that will change the longer you get down this journey. Now, for me, I'm focused on being in a place of, and I have been, what those triggers are for me. So I'm trying to learn, how do I deal with the actual triggers before they come? How do I find healing for past trauma, for the different things? How am I coming up with different emotional management systems right when that trigger starts or even before? What am I doing differently? So I'm really excited about talking about the way we're going to walk through this. And this cycle is just fascinating to me and teaches us a lot about ourselves. But I think there's a real key between craving and ritual. The studies show, once you're in that ritual part, it is harder. You can still stop, but it is harder because the next step is using. That's ultimately the time we act out on whatever that addiction is, and we have whatever we were craving. Okay. That quickly leads, once we have immediate feelings of guilt followed by shame. Guilt tells us we failed. Shame tells us we're a failure. All right. Shame actually brings it into our identity of who we are. Guilt grabs that shovel and shame digs the hole. It's huge. Then these feelings of guilt from using, get this, now become a triggering event as they move in the cycle of crave. And then we move into the cycle of craving, ritual behavior, using, circling back to guilt. And that guilt triggers the emotional trigger, which makes us want to numb ourselves so we don't feel that guilt. It's just a literal vicious cycle. All right. Most addictive behavior follows this cycle. And I realize, this is a lot to think about. But once we learn these keys, this can set us free. This is what helps us get past it. This is where we're going to break the cycle. Okay. We are going to do that. So it's a lot to think about. At this point last night was when we started talking with one another and looking at, and just did some question and answer time. So let me see. I'm going to hop out of screen sharing a minute. All right. And just say, I am really looking forward to next week, where we start looking into some of the tools to overcome this addiction cycle. And I think that's going to be really helpful. I gave you guys handouts. I'm really hoping that you're filling those out. You're spending some time really thinking about your answers with that. And if you are comfortable, I would love it if you would take a picture of those and email it to me. I think everybody has my email, or you can message it to me on Facebook. I'm assuming, you would want to keep it private. So And then I'm going to be throwing some more things in our group this week on addiction and giving you more to think about. I really kind of want to transition a little bit to doing a little more coaching with you. And I would love to do more one-on-one coaching with you. So whether that's through our group, through email, or, once our class is done, I'd even love to get together with you. So I want to help you on this journey. I know that you are able to do this. I know that you are strong enough, and I have lived enough of this to understand how hard it is, but I know it's not bigger than you. I know that you can do this. We talked last night too about how our amygdala is almost like that part of us, like the 5-year-old in our brain that says, I want this, I need it, and has that knee-jerk reaction to just jumping right through this addiction cycle really quick. And our prefrontal cortex is the adult in the room that says, hold on, we have goals, we've made plans, we have decisions. And the good news is our prefrontal cortex is strong enough to overcome that amygdala, that 5-year-old that is screaming at us. And that whole battle in our mind that's happening, our prefrontal cortex is strong enough and can overcome the temptation and can overcome the thoughts. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some moxie to get through it, but you can do it. And I want to see you free of whatever you're hoping to become free of. So, all right. With that, I will say, have a wonderful week.